To our sixth Water Talk of the year. This is July 10th, Wednesday, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and we have Annmarie Sanders with us from the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, who will be speaking about the book that they have produced, However Long the Night, Making Meaning in a Time of Crisis, a spiritual journey of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious. I want to welcome all of you to this talk, and particularly to welcome Annmarie. And what's exciting about this talk is that very rarely does the speaker come to the water office and join us at the table, but Annmarie, who is a scant 13-minute walk away at LCWR, has deigned to come to the office, be with us, and I won't mention, but we are having lunch afterwards. So those who are here will be having lunch afterwards, and we'll think of all the rest of you and eat heartily in your honor. I'm going to pass the phone around because I want my colleagues, especially my staff colleagues here at Water, to introduce themselves and let you know where they're from, because it's exciting, and also to say that this is their last Water Talk. So until they go back to college and graduate school and new jobs and start to come to the Water Talks on their own. So we welcome all of you. So, Emily?
Hi everyone, this is Emily Neufeld. I've been a staff associate here for the year, and I'm originally from Kansas.
Hi everyone, this is Kennedy Thetford. I'm a rising junior at Agnes Scott College. I'm a double major in religion and Spanish, and I'm a summer intern.
Hello everyone, I'm Cheryl Nichols from Hyattsville, Maryland, and a long-standing friend and supporter of Water.
Hello, this is Gail D. George. I'm editor of Global Sisters Report and happy to be here in person.
Hi everyone, I'm a summer intern at Water, and my name is Callie, and I'm a student at Beloit College in Wisconsin.
Hello everyone, my name is Clara Coker, and I'm one of the summer interns studying at Wesley Theological Seminary and from Maryland originally.
Frederick, Maryland.
Frederick, Maryland.
Great place.
I'm Cynthia Tootle. I'm an associate minister at the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel, and I live a couple blocks from Water.
Good afternoon. My name is Kat Pearthree, and I live in Greenbelt.
I'm Dolly Pomerleau. I live in Maryland, originally from Maine, long-term friend of Water folks, and co-founder of the Quixote Center.
And this is Diane New, one of the longest members of Water, 36 years worth. It's a pleasure always when we have Water Talks, and pleasure to have Annmarie with us. So welcome everyone.
Great, thank you. And now we will be muting the phone so that we won't need to hear your baby cry or your dog bark or you do your dishes. So we'll mute the phone and we'll allow you back on very shortly. So we'll let you know for the question and answer period.
Q&A mode is on. Participants may now unmute themselves.
So we will let you know as soon as Annmarie finishes when the question and answer period starts, and then you'll be able to press *6 and we invite you to ask your questions. Before we do that, I just want to pay a little tribute to Emily, who's finishing her full year with us as part of the Mennonite Voluntary Service Program, and we're deeply indebted, and I know many of you in the various places around the world are indebted to Emily too for the wonderful work and staff leadership and so much more that Emily has given us this year. It's just really been wonderful, and many of the notes that you get from this and the advertisements and the setting up of the phone calls and so forth is all Emily's work. So thank you, and every good wish from Water, and don't go far. Denver is not considered far. I would like to welcome you again to this 6th 2019 Water Teleconference, and I will simply let you know that Water will be closed in August. So the next teleconference will be on September, we'll open on September 3rd, and the next teleconference will be on September 11th. So we'll let you know more information through the mailing list, but we will be closed for the month of August, as is our custom, for health and well-being and fun. Like all of Water's efforts, our purpose today is not simply theoretical. Rather, we are focused on changing the cultural and intellectual assumptions that ground discrimination, that ground exclusion, and that ground destruction, both in religious and in social contexts. So our choice of this book and of Annmarie is a deliberate show of support for the many efforts of women, in this case especially the many efforts of Catholic women religious, We want to take this as a time to show our support as you and we move together to create just and loving structures. We know that we can learn from our history and we can take inspiration from the efforts of other women to remake the world. So that's why we have chosen you and this book to have as part of our discussion today. Hey, how about that women's soccer team, huh? Are we excited about that? I mean, really, with our ticker tape parade in New York City today and an interview on Rachel Maddow last night, it doesn't get any better than that. But really, the fact that they're emphasizing women's equality, I think, is just a terrific way of using their power. So the way this works is I'm going to introduce Annmarie. It'll be plenty of time after her 20 or 25-minute input for discussion, and we will take notes for you. So you don't need to take notes other than my prize note takers here. Folks at home do not need to take notes. We send you the notes afterwards. And they will be on our website along with the audio of this talk, and Annmarie will have a chance to look over those notes to make sure we get them right. And the audio and the notes will be on the website along with all the other water teleconferences. So this is a way we socialize resources, and we're really grateful for our donors who help to make this possible so that no one has to say, oh, I couldn't afford to go, I can't go to seminary, I can't go. No, you can come here and you can get the kind of education and especially feminist, womanist, mujerista education that you want. So we will end promptly at 2 to respect everybody's schedule, and then we will direct you to the website for further use of this. You can use it, in fact, for a class, for a group in your congregation. You can use it for your own personal reflection, and I certainly hope congregations of women religious will use it as time goes on for their own education and continuing discussion. With that, I welcome you, Annmarie, and I'm going to say a little bit about Annmarie because some of you don't know her. She is a member of the Sisters Servants of the Immaculate Heart of Mary in Scranton, Pennsylvania, known in Catholic vernacular, since many of you aren't Catholic, as the Scranton IHMs. And she is part of the she's the communications person for the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, referred to as LCWR, just another little abbreviation you'll want to know. And she has previously worked in communication for her own IHM community as well as for Marywood College, which was, if it is it still an IHM college?
Mm-hmm, yes.
And also in Peru, which I didn't know, for Noticias Aliadas, which is a venerable publication. She has authored several articles and edited publications on religious life, including this book that we will be talking about today, However Long the Night. And this is Making Meaning in the Time of Crisis. Dolly, you might want to pass that around so people can see it. Annmarie will discuss how the Leadership Conference of Women Religious handled a 6-year public crisis when its judgment and means of operating were called into question by the Vatican's most powerful office, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. One of our water services is to blurb books so people get a sense of what's important to read. And here's what we said about this book. We know these pithy little blurbs. We're going to do them tomorrow morning. Thoughtful reflections by LCWR leaders on their lengthy involvement with Vatican officials known as the doctrinal assessment. The women demonstrate how to deal prayerfully and skillfully in a situation of unfair power advantage. Canon lawyer Sharon Holland offers a particularly cogent analysis. As events have unfolded, it's clear that the women should have been investigating the men and not the other way around. A compelling read. Well, that's what we said here at Water when the book came out last year in 2018. And you can get it, by the way, through LCWR. It's published by them. It's on their website. I stand by that assessment, and I observe that it's a timely tale, as so much is happening in church and society for which the insights and reflections of women religious are very useful. We need new ideas about how to dialogue, how to engage impasse, as Nancy Sylvester would have it, to talk with people with whom we disagree profoundly, to find places where we overlap in interest and humanity, and mostly to find ways forward so that we don't have to participate in or even watch the destruction of our country, our world, in this case, the church that many of us call home. So we're honored to have you, Annmarie. We're delighted. We look forward to your presentation. I hope you feel at home and enjoy your time at Water. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Marian. Thank you all for coming. So it really is an honor to be able to speak about this very important process that LCWR went through for 6 long years. And Mary gave a wonderful introduction into the book and to what happened to the organization, but I do want to say that this conflict was so deep for us because it really threatened the autonomy of the organization, which was probably one of the hardest things for us to accept. And this organization, I'll tell you a little bit more about LCWR, but it's the organization on which the vast majority of Catholic sisters in this country depend. We provide resources and networking opportunities and supports to Catholic sisters. So when this announcement came of this investigation of the organization, it really stunned not only Catholic sisters, but our companions in the church and many other people in this country and around the world. And yet, the conflict was so difficult, and yet it was resolved in a way that really benefited both parties, we think. So that's why we wrote this book. How did that happen? It's the question that so many people have asked us. So I thought it would be good to explain a little bit about what the Leadership Conference of Women Religious is. And I'll use its acronym, LCWR, throughout this. But it's a member organization for those who lead communities of Catholic sisters in the United States. We have about 1,300 members, and those sisters, and they're often referred to as women religious. The terms are used interchangeably. They serve as leaders of about 300 communities of sisters in the country. And the purpose of the organization is to provide education, resources, and networking opportunities for its members. And another important point or important mission of LCWR is to use its collective voice to advocate for justice. And that was an important piece of this investigation by the Vatican. So the organization began in the 1950s, interestingly, at the initiative of the Vatican. Lots of people don't realize that the organization that was investigating LCWR also started it. And at that time, it wanted to assure that Catholic sisters were well prepared for the ministries they were in. And at that time, that was mostly as educators and nurses in Catholic institutions. And sisters took that call very seriously, that call to become well educated. I think much more seriously than the Vatican expected. And then came the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, and that council called sisters to go to the places of greatest need to serve there. So not necessarily just to stay in schools or hospitals, but where are the needs and how can you serve them? So over the years, the ministries, the lives, the spiritualities of sisters and their own understanding of religious life evolved, I'd say, rather significantly. Communities of sisters became much more proactive about their own lives and the works that they wanted to do. And they were much more discerning about how they could live their own religious lives. So we weren't living by a set of prescripted norms anymore. We were beginning to say, well, this makes more sense for our lives. So we're taking more ownership. So not surprisingly, some of those changes resulted in some conflicts with the Vatican. Over the decades, some of the church hierarchy noted their dissatisfaction with how sisters were re-identifying religious life, speaking out publicly on national issues, and often with a lot of clout. People listened to Catholic sisters. They tended to be on the ground, very involved with the people. So we had a voice that people thought had some merit. And the Vatican authorities weren't always pleased with the new ministries we were undertaking, because sometimes they weren't within Catholic-sponsored institutions any longer. So central to that whole tension was this disagreement about the relationship between women religious and church authority. And that's also a pretty important part of this conflict with the Vatican. So I'd say LCWR has always been at the forefront of this evolution of the life and always looking ahead. It's become known as an organization that's always looking to see what's the next need, what should we be doing to prepare ourselves for what the world most needs of us, in order to stay well informed and prepared to meet those needs. So that's a little bit about LCWR, and then there's the Vatican. And as we say in our book, the governance structure of the Catholic Church is described often as the last monarchy on the planet, face of the planet. You know, the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church and really has ultimate decision-making powers. So there's no separation of powers as we have in a democratic governance system. And he's assisted in the administration of the church by various church offices and within the Vatican, and that's called the Curia. And one of those offices is the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and they go by the acronym CDF. So it's CDF's duty to protect the patrimony of church doctrine, and it has the right to investigate any individual or institution that bears the name Catholic in order to assure that it has orthodoxy in its actions and teachings. So CDF really had every right to investigate our organization, although we certainly weren't expecting that to ever happen. So since LCWR has this relationship with all these different church offices, including CDF, every year its officers go over to Rome and they visit with some of those Vatican offices in order to just give a short report of what it's been doing for the year and to be accountable to the church. So I think that's important to note as well, that LCWR had a history and has a history still to this day of trying to be very accountable for everything that we do. So in 2001, this is like ancient history, the officers
Everybody
went.
born by then?
Yeah, just barely, right?
Barely, right?
Yeah. So in 2001, the LCWR officers went over for their normal visit, and they went to the CDF offices. And they had some questions about some of LCWR's speakers and some of the public stances the organization had taken. And the officers answered those questions. They weren't, so they thought, very significant. They gave the best answers that they knew, and they left feeling that CDF heard them and that those concerns were all put to rest. In retrospect, I think we look back and it was clear that LCWR really remained under some suspicion in that ensuing decade. But LCWR really was not aware of that suspicion at all. So fast forward to 2009, eight whole years later, LCWR received a letter in the mail from CDF that said that CDF was beginning what they called a doctrinal assessment of LCWR. We didn't even know what a doctrinal assessment really was. It's not something that happens very often, or it's not something CDF undertakes, especially with an organization. They may question an individual theologian about some stances, but unusual that an organization would be contacted. So over time, we learned that the assessment was beginning because our CDF was concerned that some of the speakers who came to our annual assembly, so all of our members come together once a year in August. So they said some of the speakers that we had between 2003 and 2008 espoused erroneous theological positions. So we weren't really even sure what that was. I know, shame. But there was a bishop who was appointed to meet with the LCWR officers, and they met and talked about the situation, but they came to no resolution at the end of that conversation. So after that conversation, the investigation really expanded. So it went beyond our speakers, and CDF then was interested in all of the organization's publications, workshops, prayer services, and public statements, anything that was produced for a 5-year period. And we were asked to send copies of anything, handouts from workshops.
Grocery list.
Didn't go that far. To the Vatican offices. So we sent off boxes of materials. And after they received them, we heard back like several months later that CDF had no new concerns. So we assumed that meant it was over. They saw our materials, which really don't deal with church doctrine. That's another factor in a doctrinal assessment. So surely everything, once they looked and saw what we really do, the concerns would be put to rest. So that's 2009 to 2010. So then there's, LCWR went over in 2011, met with CDF, and nothing was mentioned about this assessment. They think it's over. And they went back in April of 2012 and were handed a document called the Mandate of Reform, an 8-page document.
Ooh, wow.
That really put LCWR under scrutiny. And the mandate appointed a U.S. Archbishop to oversee the operations of LCWR. And he would be assisted by 2 other bishops from the United States for a period of up to 5 years. So that was pretty stunning news, because up until that time, LCWR had always been run by sisters who were really highly respected professional women, well-educated, running all kinds of institutions, their own communities plus other institutions. These are stellar women. So the thought of having 3 bishops who, in all honesty, they had big jobs themselves in administering their own diocese and really had no experience, for the most part, with religious life. So to have them overseeing our organization was kind of beyond comprehension. So the shock of receiving that mandate was compounded by the fact that 8-page report that detailed all the faults or supposed faults of the organization was made public only minutes after it was literally handed to the LCWR officers in Rome. So it was placed on the website of the U.S. Bishops' Conference. And then the Bishops' Conference sent out press releases to major media outlets all around this country and beyond, detailing this mandate of reform and giving them the link to the whole document. So the story went viral within just a few hours, making it not only a painful reality for us, but a very public and controversial matter. It was something that issuance of the mandate and then the 3 years that followed of trying to work through this mandate was followed very closely by the media and the general public. People seemed to be shocked by what was happening. And I always remember when a producer from the CBS news program, 60 Minutes, called. And he said, I was visiting my mother, who's Jewish, and we were sitting on the couch together, and she was saying, help me understand, why would the Vatican be investigating a group of nuns, of all people, especially when the sex abuse crisis is going on.
Yeah.
We just don't understand that. So that's what made 60 Minutes want to pursue the story as well, because they didn't understand it. Well, we don't really understand it either, but we can be in it together. So I think because of the players involved, this very important, powerful Vatican office and this group of women who've been known for centuries for their work with the people in the poorest areas of the world, that there was a conflict going on between these groups, it made it a very well-watched and well-examined controversy for the public. And for those inside the church, there are very few, I don't think there are any, who really saw a way through this that would leave LCWR intact. So it was very disheartening to hear person after person who really knew how these things worked say, it's probably not going to work for you. Yet it did. So why did we write the book? To tell that story. So, working through this conflict was, as you can imagine, a very difficult process. And for one thing, it was working with the CDF officials, but we're an organization of 1,000 women leaders, no less, who all had opinions. And they represented another 60,000 women. So not only did those leading LCWR have to figure out how do you work with the Vatican in this, they had to work with their own members. So, and our members were hurt. They were angry over the public humiliation that Catholic sisters were undergoing because this had been made so public. So how do you work with all of them in trying to get all of our members of one mind to be able to go ahead, because our leaders are really representatives of our members. So the LCWR officers had to work through many explanations of how did religious life evolve over these years? Why have sisters made the choices that they have had about educating themselves, about the way we pray, even the way we serve, why we advocate for many justice issues. We had to explain that over and over. But interesting, in the course of those conversations, where we saw that the differences between the ways CDF and officials and LCWR, the way that the two groups think, the way they operate, those differences were big, but there were also a lot of commonalities. And that was the really great learning, that beyond all those differences, we're all human beings on a common human journey. So that task of coming to understand and respect those differences, I think, is really what led to the peaceful and respectful resolution of this crisis. And the crisis was resolved 3 years earlier than we ever thought it would be. So it was resolved in April 2014. So at that time, the officers were hugely relieved that this was over. And yet people kept asking them, well, how did you do this? And what did this cost you? How did it come about? So for 2 years, they and I with them discerned, is there some benefit to talking about this more publicly? And for them, the experience was so difficult personally and professionally that they didn't even want to revisit it. So for 2 years, we went through a discernment process together, listening to the request to share the story and seeing, is there really a need or some benefit in telling it? And by the end of 2016, we're like, oh, we got to make a decision. Either we're doing this or we're not. So we met one more time as a group, and that was just a couple of weeks after the U.S. elections. So it was actually the first week of December. And you remember the whole country was talking about all of the divisions and how deep the polarization was in this country. So when we began to really list what did the organization learn from this very difficult situation, and then looked at the country at that moment, we began to see, there really are things that we learned that perhaps could be of benefit to others who feel that they're looking for ways to work through difference and polarization. So the book really is a collection of those learnings. And each chapter is about a different learning, and each one is written by a different LCWR leader. So I'm just going to mention 7 of those learnings and then open this up to our questions. So the first learning was about the roles of truth and conscience and a methodology for decision making. So the book addresses, what do you do when your conscience urges you to respond differently in a situation than what the authorities recommend that you do in a situation? So we really kind of outline, here are questions you can ask yourself if you're in a situation like that. So the second learning is about the use of a number of practices that grounded LCWR's work. And those include communal discernment, contemplation, and some of the other dispositions that we try to adopt in working through this. You know, it's really important to note that the LCWR leaders at that time weren't always of a single mind, as you can imagine. They were facing numerous questions at every juncture of this process. And how did they have to come together, to speak as one voice about this? So they were always asking questions, what approach do we take? What would be the best tone to strike at this time? What does it really mean? Our members said to us, proceed in this investigation as long as you're protecting the integrity of the organization. But what did that mean in the concrete, to protect integrity? What should be made public and what should be held confidential in this? So the book kind of shows what processes and procedures and ways of praying and reflecting together did the leaders use to be able to speak as one voice, as themselves, as the leaders, and then as the whole body of 1,300 members. So a third learning is about the challenge of building right relationships, especially in situations where misunderstanding and distrust have grown over time, which was the case for us. Our members were stunned to hear that their beliefs were being called into question, or their ways of praying. These women saw themselves as faithful members of the church, and how could it be that people were questioning? So one of them said, we didn't even recognize ourselves in CDF's description of us as it was stated in that mandate. So how do you go about developing authentic relationships with a group of people who, at least from LCWR's experience, took words out of context and used that kind of misrepresentation of truth against the group? Because when there's no trust and no truth, it's very hard to establish any kind of authentic relationship. So we try to explain in the book, how did we engage in that kind of genuine dialogue? So a fourth learning is around the importance of establishing an organization's operational values during a time of crisis. So our organization's values included nonviolence, dialogue, and acting with integrity. And that temptation to lash out at our criticizers, I have to say, was always an ever-present reality. Catholic sisters weren't beyond speaking out, and that very human inclination to defend ourselves and the conference, and to protest when there was a wrong judgment made, or errors made, or total misrepresentations made on the part of our accusers. So we wanted to justify ourselves in the conference. So recognizing how easy it would be to make those kinds of responses, LCWR made it a practice to respond to what was being said about the conference only after careful communal discernment. And that was a pretty radical act, because we were dealing with tremendous pressure from the public to react. Mm-hmm. So a fifth learning is, how do you organize for the greater public good? How do you work for the greater public good beyond just your own organization when you're working through something like this? And we were very aware that LCWR is a well-respected organization, and that people who were in situations who also felt oppressed in some way or abused were watching very carefully how LCWR handled this situation. We heard from thousands of people who would talk to us about their abusive situations that they were in, and saying, please show us a way forward for working through this. And there were so many people who longed for a more open church, who were placing great hopes on how LCWR would work through this situation. So we continuously asked ourselves, how does the public nature of this conflict, how does it provide an opportunity to advocate for change on broader levels beyond our own organization? And how could we allow the hopes of the wider public really influence our own work with the Vatican? So a sixth learning is, how do you work with untested perceptions and cultural gaps that can easily evolve into polarization, which is really kind of the heart of what happened here, that there were lots of concerns about LCWR that just went unaddressed or were talked about in secrecy. So while there is always a great value to confidentiality and privacy, there's also a great value in operating with some transparency. So had there been transparency, we wonder if the assessment would have been received differently, because people were always wondering what was behind this. Why investigate sisters now? And we really never had an answer to that. So probably a lot of the hurt and fear and anger could have been dispelled had some of those perceptions that the Vatican held been tested out much sooner. And I would say the last learning is about how do you stay spiritually grounded during a crisis that's very draining and demanding. So the book describes how important our lives of personal and communal prayer and reflection were during this long crisis, and what were some of the practices that kind of grounded that work. How did we examine our own stances and our own attitudes to successfully resolve this conflict? And the virtue of humility seemed to be very important, and we talk about that in the book. And then I'll just say I also have a chapter in here about what an organization needs to do to know when and what to communicate as it goes through a crisis. And then finally, I want to say that there's another excellent chapter written by a group of laymen and women who call themselves Solidarity with Sisters. And they were total strangers to us before April 2012. They came forward and companioned our staff throughout the years of that crisis and continue to companion us to this day. So their chapter is really great because it shows how do you apply those learnings to your own life, or your work setting, or your community setting, or your parish setting. So I think it's very valuable. So I think that's about all I want to say, and be happy for any questions that you have.
Well, great. Thank you very much. I think that's a very comprehensive overview, not only of the volume on the table, but also of a very disputed chapter in church history. And it's really wonderful that journalism is not just the first draft, but now we have a deeper sense from people who write well and who write thoughtfully about what it means and where it might take us. So with that, let me offer our thanks to you for that overview, Annmarie, and to say that now the phone is open. And all you have to do is press *6. That will unmute your phone, and then you can ask your question. I would invite you to say your name, perhaps where you're from, but just keep it as brief as you can. We have 20 minutes for conversation. We'll continue it here in the office after we close out at 2 o'clock, but we'd like to hear from folks. What are some of the questions that you might have for Annmarie? And I also want to just mention that our beloved Joe Cinto has just arrived in the office. He's been out on sick leave for a bit, and he and his daughter Tup have just arrived, so we have a certain joy in seeing him, and we'll have conversation. So thank you very much, and the floor is open. *6 will unmute your phone. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Phoebe in Boston.
Yes, Phoebe, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Annmarie. It was really inspiring to listen to you. I'm a faith-based activist in Boston, and we activists up here have struggled a lot with issues of group dynamics and organizational relations surrounded by patriarchal hierarchic structures in the church and outside the churches. So I was really a deep blessing to be able to listen to you and be inspired by you and those in the LCWR who managed so gracefully in such terrible crisis. At least at first it was terrible, I think. And I want to get the book, especially for the part about how prayer undergirded you. But for now, I would just like to ask, what was the impact on LCWR's other work that you were doing up till 2009, and I'm sure continuing through those years as best possible, and then taking off again more fully after the crisis ended. I'm curious about how it has impacted all the other kinds of work that gets so amazingly done to help marginalized people by LCWR. And I'm curious about whether whether it was possible to find a path to let the investigators know about the impact of the investigation on your lives in so many ways, the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Those are two great questions. I would want to say first about the impact of the investigation on the rest of the work of the conference. I can say kind of proudly that we really felt that we were able to carry on all of the other work of the organization. There was no stoppage in any of the services that we were able to provide, which was kind of amazing because this occupied so much time of everyone, the staff and the officers. And we really practiced something that we we didn't want to get into. We didn't want to start self-policing. So we didn't want to say, well, there's a sense out there that LCWR shouldn't be doing this or shouldn't be doing that, and let that stop us from taking a stand, speaking out, having the speakers in that we wanted, giving awards to people who we thought were worthy of being honored. So really at no time did anything change, which is miraculous. And I think that has to do with a lot of support from a lot of people rallying around the organization and helping out in so many ways. And I think what we've been able to do since then is it certainly has freed some of the psychic energy that this crisis demanded of us. So once that investigation was over, we were able to carry on our work, but I think with a little bit more energy and a sense of hope in the future. And we could talk a little bit more about these modern times, these contemporary times right now too. But I also want to say, in terms of that question about, did the Vatican realize the impact of this investigation on our lives? And I want to give a shout out to this Archbishop Peter Sarton, who was the one who headed the investigation on CDF's behalf. That this was not a task that this man wanted. Certainly, he had a huge archdiocese that he was running himself and had many other commitments and responsibilities. But he made the time to come to several board meetings of the conference where he listened until people were done telling him the impact, the emotional impact, the spiritual impact of this crisis on sisters' lives. Especially the elderly, sisters in their 80s and 90s who just couldn't imagine that the church was investigating their lives. So he graciously received all of that and listened, and I think really took that in, and it made a difference in how he responded. And he came to our big assemblies with facing 900 women on the stage and their questions to him. So I think that was a big part of how this got resolved, was the character that he brought to this as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Phoebe, for your question. The floor is open.
My name is
We have a question here in the office. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kat, and I get emotional just thinking about the subject. 2 questions. Do you have a sense at all of an organization that you need to constantly be looking behind your back? Like, is there has a sense of this could happen again being restored? And did you feel at all like the leadership all of a sudden, maybe at the ground floor level, people were pushing against the leadership? I mean, it was a crisis of your leadership, not only for the Vatican, but also a crisis for your new novices, saying, "What have you done to our organization?" You know, and wanting them to go in a reactive way, which is my #1 style. Is I'm just so reactive. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's terrible. It's crippling, really, because I lose the effectiveness of a crisis, and that's why I value the book. But I just wonder, like, how do you second guess yourself, or do you, or maybe you don't? Could this happen again?
You know, probably if the situation in the Vatican, you know, we have a new pope, and the pope came in during this assessment, so we're pretty sure, you know, we don't have this factual information, but we're pretty sure he did a lot to bring this to conclusion. And so I don't think we look over our shoulders quite as much as we might have had that change not come about. And when our officers go over to the Vatican now, it's a completely different experience. You know, their input is valued. They're asked, you know, for recommendations about things. So the whole atmosphere has changed with Pope Francis's papacy.
Well, maybe to put a little finer point on your question, has anything changed structurally that would prevent this from happening again?
Well, structurally probably not, but I think everybody knows that the need for conversation, you know, what I brought up before, this untested perceptions. Yeah. So now when we go to these Vatican offices, I mean, the conversation is much more honest and real. So structurally, there isn't anything different. Although, did you hear that? Probably Gail knows this news of the Vatican appointing
women.
70.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you say it?
Yeah, so there's a Vatican office that oversees religious life, and they have just appointed 7 women religious to their, I guess they're called members now, which means they actually have a vote in anything that this office undertakes.
Are they religious?
Yeah, women religious.
Women religious.
Yeah. So that's never happened, and that's all part of Pope Francis's movement to bring women more into the power-making and decision-making structures of the church. So that is one big switch. That,
yeah, just to translate that for people who have a Catholic history for this, this particular group that works on women religious didn't have any women religious making decisions until this week.
2000. This week?
Yeah, this week. Now, 2000 some years
Sorry,
later.
why again?
Gail DeGeorge, go ahead.
I wanted to ask something, because this actually related to it too, Annmarie, and against this whole situation involving LCWR was this backdrop of another parallel investigation of individual congregations under the same organization, this called an apostolic visitation. I don't know if you want to explain. To me, it conflated in the eyes of the public or in the mind of the public, and it was hard to detangle and to untangle both of those things. But there was this other backdrop where individual congregations. Maybe you can help explain that.
Sure. So there are a number of different Vatican offices, but one is the congregation for, it has a very long name, but it's basically the congregation that
Sickle cell.
Oh, right, sickle cell. It oversees religious life. So that organization, which was being led by a whole different staff of people. In 2009, it also launched its own investigation, as Gail said, of all the orders of Catholic sisters in the United States, looking at our quality of life. That too was a very, very painful thing. That why would the Vatican be looking at our lives and our as well as our properties and our finances, and our congregations have always been independent or autonomous, certainly working within the church, but we hold our own money, etc. So that was going on. That started in January of 2009, and then in March, this whole different office within the Vatican, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, started the investigation just of our organization. So this book is about the organization's investigation, but Gail is right. The two things were going on in a parallel way, and people, got them all mixed up, understandably, but yeah, it made it all the worse.
But that's why this news is so significant this week. Also, because it was the very organization that was investigating these congregations now finally has women religious as part of their organization. That's why the significance is quite profound.
And there was, by the way, a WATERtalk about the volume that was published about the apostolic visitation that you can get on the WATER website, www.waterwomensalliance.org. The floor is open. Next question, please. Your name and your question. Dolly, go ahead. Dolly Pomerleau at the table.
My question is, how much of this was a smokescreen to put behind the public, or so the public can't see what's going on with the sex abuse scandal? So you pick on the women, and you make them the focus, and then you're hiding all the other stuff that's going on, which is really a problem. So I mean, I'm sure that that's not something that was ever acknowledged. But what's your view on that?
I mean, who knows? But that was always what most people thought, that it was a smokescreen. But we have no way of knowing, what was really behind this.
But still.
Yeah. The timing didn't help the church with that, since the sex scandal was so public, and that was usually the question. Why would the investigation be on sisters when this other reality is happening at the same time? But who knows?
But I think that is a really important question, Dahlia. It's one that I would ask as well, because I think that hindsight's 20/20, but what we know now, just 5 years later, I think makes it quite obvious that there were many things going on, that this was a helpful way to keep people distracted from looking at. I always found it remarkable. For example, I could see the sisters being understood as soft on things like women's ordination or gay and lesbian questions, or those sorts of things. But Dominus Jesus, that was the one that always put me over. For those who don't know Dominus Jesus, it was from the same CDF. It was their document. It wasn't even an encyclical. It was just their document. And it had to do with the notion, and I pardon the phrase for any who might be sensitive, but only Catholics can be saved. Not just Christians, but only Catholics can be saved. And so one of the issues that was raised, which I thought was just extraordinary at the time, but now it seems to me what Dolly's raising raises the possibility that the extraordinary reach to think that women religious were soft on something that is so egregiously offensive that of anybody's salvation, much less Catholics, goodness knows. But that, I think, is the kind of thing that gives us the sense that maybe the smokescreen was not just something we speculated, but I think historians, it's not for us to tell, and certainly not for this volume, but I think it does raise a very important question down the pike as we read the history anew. Dominus Jesus being my best example of what, and I in my view, I would argue that certainly 50% of American nuns don't know what Dominus Jesus is even today. You know what I mean? Much less that they cared then, but but I mean, they didn't even know, and they were being investigated.
They weren't teaching one of those.
That's right. So I do think that's a critical issue. Other questions and comments, please.
I have a question. When you were describing the situation, sort of with the Vatican, the CDF, it sounded like they didn't know who you were, and somehow you had to build up a trust with certain individuals, I presume is how it had to happen, that there were certain people. It sounds like the Archbishop here spent some time, but how did that trust happen with those individuals?
Well, So most of the work was with the U.S. bishops.
Yeah.
So, and then they would go to CDF on our behalf.
Okay.
So some of that was their advocacy. But, you know, the LCWR presidents always tell the story at their meeting with CDF, kind of well into the investigation, that one of the CDF staff said, I think I finally get it, that there's been this, institutionalized perception of LCWR that has just grown and grown over the years, that nobody tested out. And, we've just passed it on from generation to generation. And that was like this, big aha moment for everyone to say, if only we would test out our perceptions of one another. And I think that's what they began to do then, to say.
Okay, and it was perceived as powerful. It was perceived as radical. What was the
LCWR?
Yeah.
I think part of it was, there are conferences of religious all around the world.
Yeah.
LCWR is kind of in the forefront, so we're kind of looked to. What LCWR is doing, many of the other conferences.
So it's an instigator.
Ringleader.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, I mean, what are the?
It wasn't
yeah,
a positive. Let's
yeah, okay. I mean, that's what I was trying to get. Where could the spin have gotten?
Right.
Okay.
And the other thing is, speaking out publicly about some justice issues.
Okay.
And people listening to sisters.
Yeah, okay.
I want to ask Betty Thompson, since you are one of the authors of this volume, would you have a question or a comment that you'd like to make, or any reflection now several years hence from what you have written, especially how warmly welcomed you were at the Vatican Embassy by Mr. Vigano, who now turns out to be rather someone who opposes the current Pope. So I just wonder, Betty, if you have any further insights you'd like to share, and I'm just glad you're with us.
Star 6.
Star 6, Betty. No?
What? Did I just drop out?
Is that Betty Thompson? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, Betty, go ahead.
Okay, good.
You're fine.
Somebody said, some voice said meeting canceled.
That's all right. You're fine.
Okay. Really what I've been thinking about, I finally have read a long, wonderful, did I say long? Treatise that Sister Marie McCarthy, on the staff at LCWR, doing leadership programs.
Our dinner guest last night.
And a friend of many of you as well. Something she's recommended for years, an article by Bernard Loomer, who was the dean of the University of Chicago Divinity School, about two uses of power. He calls one unilateral power, which we'd all associate with the normal sense of the term, in this society, top-down kind of, I'm going to have an impact on somebody else. In contrast to relational power, which has the potential for transformation, because it's the power. It's a power with the capacity not only to affect others, but to be affected by others, and to look not for what is my goal in how I want something to change, but to have as a goal the good of the relationship, which is different from the common good or something else. That article I've just finally read, and it clarified for me, and really a lot of what we've talked about through the years, and what's in this book. Throughout this whole process, and of course continuing and prior to that as well, I think but this was a particular powerful point of use of that power, that what LCWR did was to stand on relational power understanding that the only way we're going to be here is in a mutual way. And I guess one of the things I may never have asked clearly, I'm not sure I can ask it now, is it's always sounded as if Archbishop Sarton had some of that in him to start with. But it's a different thing to really say, we're both going to be here. We're here for our relationship. And to just keep being that way, I never got the impression that this was something that there was a kind of an attempt to convert or proselytize or, to be didactic about what this meant in meetings with the Archbishop and the bishops, and the CDF, but rather that this was a way of being so deep that it just was how everyone was in relation to them, and they eventually absorbed that same ethic, that same sense of relationship as opposed to conflict.
Thanks, Betty. I think we're going to have to move along here. So,
like the reality.
yeah, we're going to have to move along. So I'm going to ask Annmarie to respond. Thank you for your comment, and then we're going to close out. So would you like to make a quick response to Betty?
No, it just I agree with you, Betty, and I think what we learned about what's at the heart of relationship building and why we build relationships, I think was probably the most transformative part of this whole process for LCWR, and I think something that the organization will continue to try to work out of, and I would imagine maybe the Vatican as well.
Well, we can only hope.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We are deeply grateful here at Water to Annmarie Sanders for being with us. The book is called However Long the Night, Making Meaning in a Time of Crisis, a Spiritual Journey of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, and you can find it on their website. The even smaller print says the story of how an organization found an alternate contemplative way of working through impasse, and you've certainly given us a great insight into it today, and we so appreciate your being with us and hope that you'll come back to Water very frequently. We will have on Tuesday next week, the 16th, a Water Liturgy, Diane New and Water staff hand in hand, imagine. The next Water meditation will be on Monday, September 9th, and I will be leading that on a topic to be announced. And the Water Talk will be on Wednesday, September 11th at 1 o'clock. And all of these events, prayer, meditation, even, and Water Talks are all on the website so that you can listen, you can read the notes, and you can certainly come to the office or be on the phone for any of them, and we look forward to your participation. We also look forward to our vacation in August. We will be leading the way. We'll be the leadership conference here of Water, showing the way to how to vacation and get out of town and enjoy ourselves. And again, information on all Water activities can be found on our website at www.waterwomensalliance.org. I want to thank my staff colleagues who I know will edit the tape and send out the notes. We'll send them to you first to have a look. If you have a manuscript, we always like those. And I hope that all of you who were with us, even if you didn't have a chance to ask your question, will feel free to share this conversation with your friends. Keep the conversation going, as we will now over lunch. We're starving. And we look forward to chatting again in September. So meanwhile, strength to all of you, and in each kind of work you're doing for intellectually informed social justice work. Please enjoy rest and relaxation in August, and we'll see you in September. Thanks again, Annmarie. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.